All right, the recording is in progress. Here we are, another Wednesday night with Richard Rohr and Just This. And so great to have you all, and great to have you all if you're watching the recording. And if you would like to join us live, all the information is there in the comments section. So take a look at the links. We'd love to have you. But feel free to just keep watching any way that you can. We're going to be starting tonight on page 85, Knowing and Not Knowing. One of those nice definitive contemplative statements, right? About as definitive and absolute as it gets.
Can
Knowing
I
it,
ask you a quick question, Dave?
you may.
How many pages is that book?
485.
Okay, so I should go on the Amazon and grab it or something like that.
It might not be a bad idea. We got 125 pages.
Okay.
Yeah, something like that. So
I mean,
yeah,
I could just read it and catch up,
Which
so
book?
I don't have the book.
you should get the book. It's a good
Okay.
book.
All right.
You
Thank you,
weren't
Dave.
kidding, right, Dave?
I'm sorry?
You were kidding. It's not 485 pages.
I was kidding. It's 125. And let's see.
Dave,
126
so
pages.
what page are you on?
We are on page 85.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll still
So
still get
there's
the
what?
book.
Another
So,
30
Little,
pages left to go.
little more than halfway.
all right. Thank you.
You got it, buddy. Meantime, just listen carefully, okay?
I do.
All right. Is there any business from last week that you want to talk about? Anything you've been thinking about? Anything we did not develop?
What we don't know.
Anything we don't know we don't know?
No, I'm talking about the afterlife we were talking about mainly.
No, we're not
You
going to
know.
go there. All right. Well, then let's dig into tonight's little bite. Knowing and not knowing. Blaise Pascal, the French philosopher and savant, said that people never do evil so completely and cheerfully as when they do it from a religious conviction. Gotta love that. He recognized that a little bit of a good thing is often a very bad thing. There is no right group or ritual that will assure your transformation. Each group produces major saints and also major pushback against them. Healthy religion is always humble about its own real holiness and knowledge. It knows that it does not know. Great spiritual teachers learn to balance knowing with not knowing. As illustrated in this oft-quoted aphorism, it ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. The true biblical notion of faith, which balances knowing with not knowing, is rather rare today, especially among many religious folks who think faith is being certain all the time, when the truth is the exact opposite. But we have little theology of darkness today. Anybody who really knows also knows that they don't know at all. Medieval theology called this docta ignorantia, or learned ignorance. All right. Any initial thoughts? Takeaways?
That's a wonderful statement, that never do evil so completely. Um, yeah, that really stands out to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to contradict all of that. All this chapter contradicts this, how you sometimes you just feel like this is the right way to do something, the right direction to go. This is like the opposite of that for me. Especially the knowing and the not knowing. Because we build on the knowing.
Uh-huh.
And what I don't know, I don't know. But in this, it's saying what you do know, maybe you don't know.
Yeah. Well said. So is this spinning your head around a little bit, Tony?
This whole book spins my head around. But I think it ties in well with yesterday, with Sister Ellen's position. I think it tied in well, because I think there's sometimes, even in things that maybe aren't religious, that there's things we know and don't know, and we can get so caught up and miss the micro or macro. So,
Well, we're going to come right back to that statement as we start to break this down a little bit. But before we do, anything else?
Yeah, I just commented. I'm not sure that I understand the context of, but we have little theology of darkness today.
Oh, don't worry, I'm going to spend some time on that.
Okay, good.
Yeah, 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 because he didn't develop that at all.
No, I was kind of wondering. That was like a throwaway thought, and I was like, what the heck does that mean? Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, we'll talk about that.
I think for me, it's that feeling of being self-righteous. Sometimes I'm not even aware that I'm self-righteous. It's that hubris too, until
Mhm.
somebody points it out, or it's my fall from grace. Then I say, "Oh my gosh, I thought I was so right." Yeah.
It's a lot of it's what we've been talking about for a long time now. You know, that the opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty. So getting back to what we're talking about here is this knowing and not knowing. You know, what is problematic for us is what we are certain of, what we think we know, what we think is absolutely true, opposed to all those other things, that we're right and everyone else is wrong. That is the position that in which and under which faith has left the building. We are no longer on a faith walk if we think we're certain. And that is so ironic and so paradoxical because we have been taught that faith is about certainty.
Hmm.
You know, we on Sunday we were talking about Jesus rebuking Peter when he gets out of the boat, takes a few steps, and starts sinking again. Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? Right? We hear something like that, and we say, well, there it is. He has little faith because he's doubting. Doubt is the opposite of faith, and it's just like, no, without doubt, there is no faith. When we talked about, just like when we were talking about propitiation and expiation, why, if the original ancient word meant both, why was propitiation chosen as opposed to expiation? Well, it depends on what lens you're wearing. If you're a hammer, then the whole world looks like a nail. If you are focused on justice, then you're going to use propitiation because that's an appeasement of an angry God. But if you're looking through the lens of love, compassion, then expiation is at one minute, it's atonement. It is the expiation of guilt, or the reduction or the elimination of guilt. And so, how you look at that. The same thing with the word that was translated as doubt. It really has the meaning of second guessing. It's when we start to think again. To get out of the boat is a non-rational action. It's a faith action. It literally is a leap of faith. It's getting out of the boat of our concrete, egoic, rational thought. That little boat that's floating on the sea of chaotic non-rationalism, you know, to get out of that and move into the big infinite waters that our faith walk is taking us is a big leap. But as soon as we start thinking again, then we get fearful again and we want to get back in the boat. And then we've left the realm of faith. And so it's not a contradiction when Jesus says, "Oh, you have little faith. Why did you doubt? Why did you second guess yourself? Why did you try to get back in the boat?" But doubt is absolutely essential. This ability for us to know that we don't know, this ability for us to embrace our uncertainty and realize that that is just part of the human condition. It's never going away. God is mystery. God cannot be comprehended by human beings. And so if we can get comfortable with that, if we can embrace that, then we can really walk in faith. And there is conviction, of course, but conviction is not the same as certainty. And once we can embrace our convictions in the midst of uncertainty, then we can really begin to trust. And trust is where all of this, that's really the gold standard, to be able to trust, because then our anxiety and our fears start to subside. And even though we don't understand rationally, we trust. And so it's a whole different proposition. So we're trying to get to that point where we can let go of the fool's errand of trying to be certain, to think that somehow, our faith can reduce God to a certainty. It can't happen. And there have been so many great quotes about that. A comprehended God is no God at all. I think that was Brennan Manning. I wouldn't want a God that I could comprehend. So many of these writers and thinkers have come to this same pass and expressed it however they do. But we've got to get to the same place ourselves individually. And this knowing and not knowing is just huge. Got to admit, we don't know that. Now, coming back to the first paragraph, people never do evil so completely and cheerfully as when they do it from a religious conviction. If you agree with that statement, why would that be so? Why do you think that would be so if you agree with that statement?
I think that they would revel in their evil, which they may not know they're doing, because they think they're doing the right thing, or they think they're right in doing it.
Absolutely. So we're right back to certainty again, right?
Right.
And when is a person ever more certain than when they have co-opted God to their side? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're talking about here, and we're seeing it in the political arena. Everybody is co-opting God. God is on everybody's side. No matter if they're diametrically opposed to each other, God is on everybody's side anyway. Same thing with the Civil War that Lincoln was talking about in the second inaugural address. Both read the same Bible, both sides pray to the same God. Nobody's prayers could be answered fully, right? And so here we are co-opting God. You will never feel more certain of yourself. You will never feel more righteous and justified in all sorts of just absolutely atrocious and abhorrent behavior than when you feel you have God on your side, because that makes you certain. Certainty is really the kiss of death. And we have to recognize that.
And when it goes awry, it can create fanaticism, which can start wars and God knows what else. So that's the worst side of it, I think.
No, that's exactly what we're talking about, Kathy. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So it is a sad irony that it's religion that gives us that kind of certainty most often. So that what he says, you never do evil so completely and cheerfully. Cheerfully. Interesting word, right? Interesting word choice. That's when we do it from a religious conviction, because then certainty is absolute. And we think we're justified. We think we can do these things with God's approval and God's power and so on and so forth. So Jesus' statement from the cross becomes even more poignant when we put it in those terms, right? Here are the people who are murdering him, executing him in one of the most horrible ways that's ever been devised by man. And they're mocking him and they're spitting at him and they're deriding him and doing all the things that they're doing from that place of absolute religious conviction. They believe they are doing the exact right thing, And he just looks at them and says, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. They literally don't. They are lost inside of that certainty. They're lost inside their little shell. The world is self-consistent. It's all justified and it all makes sense. But they literally don't know what they're doing. As are all of us when we devolve into some sort of certainty, when we believe we're absolutely certain. Now, as I have before, I want to make the distinction between certainty and conviction, because conviction is something that we become convinced of through our own experience. It's not something we read out of a book. It's something that we have experienced. That conviction can go right to the bone, and it can look a lot like certainty from the outside in. But from the inside out, we know that this conviction can't be proven to anyone else, certainly. But it really can't even be proven logically to us. If we tried to explain why we're convinced to somebody else, we can't do it, because it's going to come right down to, they'll just say, well, that's just a subjective truth that you have chosen to believe. And the answer is, yeah, exactly. That's what a conviction is. Because of my experience, I've chosen to believe this. But it can order my existence, it can order my choices, it can inform my choices, and it can lead me to trust. But it's not the same as certainty, because in my conviction, I still have room for other people's convictions. I can still occupy liminal space, right? I can still stand on the threshold and see the limitations of my point of view and see truth coming from another camp. Certainty doesn't allow us to do that. Certainty always must be defended. Convictions can have an open hand and allow freedom for everyone else to have their convictions. It's very, very different in that respect. Thoughts or comments?
I was thinking about a story I like to tell about a very wise professor talking with a young student. And the young student is zealous about his studies and what he's learning. And the professor is kind of listening and nodding his head and said, listen, he said, whenever you have one of those moments, one of those epiphanies, one of those moments of certainty, and you're taken by something you've just learned or thought or experienced, immediately say to yourself, but I could be wrong. Otherwise, whatever path you were on that led you to that point, you'll stop right there instead of continuing on that path. And so I see certainty as like you stop right there, you build your house, and then you go nowhere. And life passes you by, and you don't learn anymore, you don't experience anymore.
Absolutely perfect. Which is
Thanks.
why I believe that the angels told the women who came to Jesus' tomb on Sunday, you know, why do you seek the living among the dead? Because certainty is among the dead. Certainty is static. Certainty doesn't move anymore, just as Brady is describing. Life is always in motion. God's spirit is always in motion. It's defined as motion. Remember, it's ruha and ruach both mean wind and breath and spirit all at the same time because it's defined by motion. And certainties don't move. They are static. They lock us down. Convictions don't. And even with the convictions that I hold and have held for a long time now, I realize they're not immutable. If I have new experience, it can change my convictions. It's possible. You know, I don't see it happening in certain areas in terms of my conviction about God's love and certain really basic convictions like that. But hey, I have to be open. If I'm really going to continue to move with God's Spirit, then I have to be ready at any moment to sell everything I have, give it to the poor, and then continue on, because that's what this whole process is about. But that's a perfect point to make, Brady. Certainties are static. They don't move anymore. You might as well just go home. Okay, Jerry.
Sure. This is real simple. Yesterday, I was doing Course in Miracles with Lorendi and Mark, and one of the exercises we did was to take a few minutes and look at 6 different things from where you were sitting, and just look at it. Be in the present, hold on to it. And I, with certainty, thought I knew what was in my house. I've lived here since 2006. It's amazing if you let go of this knowing, so when I would look around my house, and she said, pick, whatever you first see. And so I happened to look at a lamp. To me, it's a funny story, and to me, it fits. And I, for the first time, noticed there was roses on it. And I've had that lamp forever. And I was certain that I knew what that lamp looked like. And then when I took the time to stop and just be and just look, I could see the roses. Does that make sense? I mean, to me, that's what hit me. It's like I'm always certain I know, what as I in my house, but if I would just take the time to look, I'm not so certain that I know exactly what's in my house or what they look like. Anyway, I just thought I would share that.
Pretty cool object lesson, huh?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
It really was. And also just being fitting into, what we're, keep learning and I keep trying to learn is being just present for a second. Just be present for 10 seconds or 12 seconds, whatever, and start with, I see, fill in the blanks differently. And that fit for me for this. I see whatever that conviction is differently. And I that's what I'm getting out of this so far.
Yeah. And this idea of certainty is not just relegated to religious or spiritual ideas. It has to do with everything across the board, of course. The political obviously comes to mind. I was just talking to someone this afternoon who is just apoplectic about the way things are going in the country and so on and so forth, and imputing motives to the other side. How she can't respect and just understand anyone who would have these opinions or vote this way or this or that. And it's like, well, that's exactly then where you need to start. If you can't articulate the reasons that the other side believes what they believe, if you don't understand the fears that the other side, quote unquote, is dealing with that causes them to believe and act the way that they do, then you have dropped into your own certainty that is now static and precludes you from being able to move, to connect at all. And that's what we're talking about, whether it's religious, political, or anything, that sports teams, right? Anything, it really doesn't matter. As soon as we drop into certainty, we have really left the flow of life, we're in that static place. And that's why certainty is so damaging. And faith is the opposite of that. Faith is the embrace of uncertainty and doubt, but with the conviction to act as if the things that we say we believe are true anyway, to act in the presence of doubt, not to let that uncertainty paralyze us. You can take a look at so many of the miracles of Jesus, and when he's curing paralytics, don't just think about physical paralytics. Think about people who are paralyzed in action and decision because either they're certain or they're so afraid of being uncertain that they really can't act decisively anymore. To be freed from that, to be able to move again, to flow is what the real healing is all about. So we need to be ruthlessly honest with ourselves enough and aware to really take a look. Where are our calcified places? Where are our static places where we're not moving anymore? Because it's not going to be all of a piece. There's going to be parts of us that are static and then parts of us that are still flowing. And we want to free that up as much as we possibly can. And so it's a process. It's not going to happen all at once, obviously. And the more afraid we get, the more we are going to crave certainty. The more that we're going to want to shelter under the strong man or woman's wings and feed off their certainty, kind of vampire-like, because we need it. We're afraid. We want some strong walls around us. And Jesus doesn't give us that. He doesn't give us a certainty. So it's a question of whether you're willing to continue to sell everything that you have and continue to follow. And it's a daunting process, but it gets easier as you go. Hey, let's say, go ahead, Judy.
Yeah, can I just add something? Started making me think about, it's partly through the miracles course and a lot of what you have said, and Dave, over the time I've been with you about becoming aware of my perceptions of others that are so related to this, the tendency I can spring right up to judge someone else. And I, I, I've realized over a lot of time that if I don't question that my perceptions of them and are rooted in assumptions that I'm making about them, kind of what you were saying about the political environment and that kind of stuff. Um, and if I'm not willing to question that I don't have the whole truth of someone, and I might be judging, this little iota of data, so to speak, that I have about that person from something that they said, or maybe um, conversations that I've had over time. And even people that I think I know really well. But I always have to ask myself, what if I'm wrong? What if they're not like that at all? What if my assumptions about them are flawed? That I really don't understand where they're coming from, what basis they have of acting in a certain way, what fears they've had, what trauma they've had in their life. And boy, does that thankfully brings me to a very humble place in questioning a lot of what I perceive. And it saved my life. It's made me so much more compassionate and open-minded. And even in this political climate, I mean, I'm relegating myself to tidbits of news that I hear. And at one point I realized I was getting myself churned up about some of the things that I was hearing that our country was in for from our president. And um and I was focusing on the heartlessness of some of his decisions, and I challenged myself to back away from that and just to ask myself, what if some of the things that he's trying to do actually are good, or they bring about good consequences? And I got to admit, and I wrote out some of the things. I made myself a list, and it covered, like, I don't know, a page and a half about things that could be true about what he's doing, or the positive consequence it might have that I don't see right now. And that helped at least soften my heart and to bring me down, in temperature, my emotional temperature, to kind of get it down to, a more grounded place of not knowing. I mean, that's what it comes down to, you know, and I heard somebody say recently, that we are all going to have to experience the consequences of these new decisions that are going to be coming at us. And maybe that's God's gift to us, that we get to see, the things that really move us to be convicted in a certain way, but to avoid certainty, that and to check our assumptions along the way. But maybe experiencing the consequences, whether they turn out well or not so well. I think there's going to be a journey for all of us in this.
Well, that's certainly true. Absolutely. And it always is every 4 years, right? So here we are on another 4-year journey. Let's see what happens. It's only been a week, and we've already drawn our certain conclusions about what it is we're seeing. So we just going to have to play this out and see what happens. And we can react to what's real rather than what we're certain of. And that's the difference between judgment and discernment. We've made that distinction too. Judgment is a conclusion we reach based on a preset standard that keeps us at arm's length from everyone and everything. Discernment is a conclusion we reach through experience. That's very different. That means we had to get up close and personal. We had to throw in, we had to risk something in order to have that discernment. And so we need to discern, but we should be avoiding the judgment because that keeps us divided. So yes, but the process that Judy is talking about, and she was echoing Brady's professor, question yourself, what is it that you really know? And what if you're wrong? Keep playing that out. Be intellectually curious. Ask people, why in the world are you doing what you do? Tell me, I really want to know. How are we going to learn if we don't? And be open. And so it's an interior attitude. It's a humility. It's many things. But without it, we're not going to get anywhere along Jesus' way.
Right.
And that's why we're here. This group here, that's what we're trying to do. How can we be more perfect followers of Jesus? How can we do that? Well, this is going to be ground zero right here, is being able to accept uncertainty. Right?
Well, I want to add what I learned over the years is actually, Dave, is what you taught me. Because, I go to my other Bible study, I go to my other fellowship, and many of them have a political view that is different from mine. And I've come to the point where when somebody would say something during the fellowship class, I will keep quiet but seethe with anger. I've learned to accept what it is because I enjoy their company. And the one who made this very opposite from my view, and her name is also Judy. And I said, oh my gosh, okay, so this is her political view, and it's that judgment, right? So one day she asked me, Ellen, because she plays the guitar, Ellen, what is your favorite song? And I said, oh yeah, this is my favorite, Goodness of God. And she said, I never heard of that. 8 days later, the next Sunday we met. She learned it, she played it, and we sat, and it was the most loving gift she gave to me.
Oh.
And I love her for it. And yeah, and I have a good relationship with her, but I don't want our views to be a dividing line. I want her. I don't care about her views anymore. We don't even talk about it. I mean, she doesn't know that I don't want to talk about it, is what I mean, right? But she's still saying, oh yeah, in our next election here in California, SB blah, 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 and la, la, la. And I just let it slide. It used to make me angry, but it doesn't matter anymore because I love her.
So especially when it comes to people, but probably in general, we don't want to be single issue voters, right? We don't want to reduce people to a single issue that we agree or disagree. We want to let people be the open, complex, constantly mystifying and surprising creatures that they are. And we can't do that if we are locked down in our certainty. So this is just the stuff of life. So if you want your life to be better, if you want the experience of life to be better, then start to accept life as life is, which is uncertain. You're not going to know it all right? Continuing on, there is no right group or ritual that will assure your transformation. Absolutely, 100% true. I'm certain of that. I have experienced that. And one of the reasons is we're always defining sacraments, whenever we do a sacrament at the effect. And we make sure that we say that a sacrament is an outward expression of an inward transformation. So the group or the ritual, the sacrament, that doesn't transform us. It's an aid for us to be able to reduce the blockages to our own transformation. But we have to bring the transformation to the table. It's not going to be handed to us. Transformation doesn't work from the outside in, it works from the inside out. And so there is no right group. There is no ritual that is going to transform us. But they can help us They can create an environment. They can create a safe place. They can create the fellowship and the connection and the community that we all need in order to be able to take this journey, because nobody does it alone. But they don't do it for us, okay? Each group produces major saints and also major pushback against them. So every group is going to be a mixed bag, all right? That's okay. What is Ellen just telling us, about these friends of hers? They don't see eye to eye, but they can stand shoulder to shoulder. Beautiful. Healthy religion is always humble about its own real holiness and knowledge. It knows that it does not know. If only more churches would put that up on their marquees, right? But they want to pretend that they do know. They want to pretend that they have the certain knowledge, and, especially in stressful times, that draws a crowd. People want that certainty, but it's not healthy. And it is moving us in the exact opposite direction that religion should be taking us. It should be taking us into the mystery, not into more illusion of certainty in egoic ways. It should be opening us up to the mystery, opening us up to selling everything, picking up our cross daily and denying ourselves, and all those metaphors that Jesus used. Great spiritual teachers learn to balance knowing with not knowing, as illustrated in this oft-quoted aphorism, it ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble, it's what you know for sure that just ain't so. The true biblical notion of faith, which balances knowing with not knowing, is rather rare today, especially among many religious folks who think faith is being certain all the time, when the truth is the exact opposite. But we have little theology of darkness today. Anybody who really knows also knows that they don't know at all. Medieval theology called this docta ignorantia, or learned ignorance. So let's get into this theology of darkness a little bit so we can understand what he's talking about. I found a piece, and I'm going to share my screen. And this is also Richard Rohr. Y'all can see that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, not yet?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so this is distilled down from Richard Rohr. Theology of darkness. Richard Rohr's theology of darkness is the idea that people should be comfortable with imperfection and embrace the darkness. Now, we can substitute for darkness the shadow side that we've talked about before in here. It's going to be the same idea. He believes that people should let go of their desire for gooey feelings and instead focus on love. So maybe you might start to think, well, love is gooey feelings, isn't it? But what he's talking about, and we've talked about this in here before. Remember, we talked about that the gooey feelings, the pink cloud, the sense of being held and warm and having a lot of emotional support, spiritually speaking, was looked at as consolations by the ancient church. It was what the newcomer needed at a very tender time after their conversion, as they're making the transition into more mature faith. But it was a transitional phase that was supposed to be moved through. It was considered immature. And that interesting, the gooey feelings that we think is the be all and end all of the proof that we are tight with God was looked at as immaturity in the early church. And then you would move into the desolations, where the sense of all of that support, visible support or emotional support, was removed. The way John of the Cross talks about it is the dark ray of faith that became, so pure that it became invisible, and it looked like the safety net was removed. And so this idea of gooey feelings is that idea of those consolations. To focus on love understood, I'm going to assume, I'm going to just say, as complete oneness, unity, identification with the beloved, with God, with each other. That sense of identification does not necessarily have any sentimentality attached to it, does not necessarily have any gooey feelings of affection. So we have to realize that love is not necessarily something that is felt emotionally, and it isn't defined by the behavior. The behavior flows from the connection. So here are the key ideas. Embrace imperfection. Rohr believes that people should be okay with imperfection and dryness. That was one of the things that really was hard for me at the beginning because everybody around me in that evangelical setting was talking about how God spoke to them every day and told them exactly what they were supposed to do, and they felt, sort of a rational connection with God. And I never had that. I never felt that. I remember trying to manufacture it so I could have something to talk about in church, right? And just feel like I was part of the crowd. But Thomas Keating was brilliant on this in his book. Which one is it? I'm not going to remember the title right now because I'm having a senior moment. It was his second book on centering prayer. Something of love. Anyway, he talked about that some of the most mature spiritual people he knew who had been following for 40 years thought there was something wrong with them because they didn't have that gooey feeling kind of sense of connection with God. And he said, nothing could be further from the truth. This idea of being okay with imperfection and even that sense of spiritual dryness, we don't necessarily have to have that emotional feeling in order to have the connection, the actual encounter. And they occupy kind of different places. He says that divine perfection is the ability to include imperfection. So a theology of darkness, a theology of integrating and accepting our shadow, first of all, is to embrace our imperfection. First of all, to admit that it's there and not try to admit that we're certain that we have it all together, and then to embrace it, to accept suffering. Rohr believes that suffering is a part of life and that it can teach people and shape them. He says that people should allow suffering to transform them and the world. But so many of our churches are more on a prosperity model, right? Suffering is looked at as something is wrong with your relationship with God, that God shows his favor by granting prosperity. And so we're running away from the very kind of experiences that are the ones that can grow us up and grow us deeper. Suffering is the force strong enough to part the curtain of our illusions and allow us to see a more expansive there out there. Find God in the darkness. Rohr believes that the darkness can be an opportunity to find God in new ways. He says that people can look for God in the darkness, even if they don't feel like praying. So this is a being present to all our moments, no matter what they contain. Not just the ones that we like, not the ones that we have some sort of preference for, but even the ones that we have aversion for, to lean in there too. And the moments that hurt, the moments that are even full of loss or even trauma, to be able to lean in there, not try to run, avoid, self-medicate, pray away, spiritually bypass, any of that stuff. Still lean in because God is just as present there as anywhere else. Follow the Franciscan path. Rohr believes that following the Franciscan path of transformation can help people find forgiveness and love. And the Franciscan path is also a sort of a via negativa or an apophatic way. We've talked about this before. It's a theology of removing everything that would be of distraction. The Franciscans, the early Franciscans, especially Francis and Clare, renounced all their worldly possessions and they moved into voluntary poverty as a way of living that humility, living that selling of everything in order to get all of those distractions out of the way. And Jesus, of course, talks about that as well. So following that Franciscan path, simplicity, I guess basically we can talk about it as simplicity is a key element there. And then finally, to be patient with the darkness. Rohr believes that Jesus was patient with darkness and slow growth. He says that people should be willing to live with non-perfection. Rohr's ideas about darkness are explored in his book, Hope Against Darkness, The Transforming Vision of St. Francis in an Age of Anxiety. So this last one is kind of what we're just talking about, balancing the now and the not yet. Even as we're working for not yet, even as we're working to improve ourselves from the inside out, improve our relationships with other people personally, improve the course of our nation and our political agendas, whatever it is that we are looking at that we know need work and we want to be a part of that work, it never should come at the expense of the present moment. If we are so focused on the not yet that we can't enjoy the now anymore, then we're out of balance. and we're missing the whole purpose of life. But if we only focus on the now and we never have any larger story arc that is taking us into the not yet, then we're also missing the purpose of life. We need both. As human beings, we need both. We need to have a goal to work toward. We need to have a purpose that we feel that we can engage in, but we also have to have a sense of meaning that comes from just being here and being now. So to be patient with the parts of us that we know are not yet ripe, right? To be able to let that be and to still enjoy ourselves in spite of the fact that we know that we're not yet ripe. That is the balancing act that we're talking about. And it's absolutely essential. So hopefully, Judy, this gives you a sense of what the theology of darkness is all about.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot about embracing the shadow. But wait, there's more.
Could you send that out, Dave?
I certainly can, and I shall. And for those of you who get Rohr's daily meditations, this is one that comes, this is the 18th. So what are we at, 29th? So this is a week and a half ago or so. And it's called Unafraid of Our Faults. And so I'm just going to read through this quickly, but you can see how it's going to relate to everything that we've just been talking about. An essential aspect of Franciscan spirituality is what Father Richard Rohr calls the integration of the negative. Rather than insisting that God values perfection or an idealized morality, Francis of Assisi intuited through the example of Jesus' life and death that God could be found in all things, even those our religion and culture urge us to reject. Father Richard writes, I suppose there is no more counterintuitive spiritual idea than the possibility that God might actually use and find necessary what we fear, avoid, deny, and deem unworthy. This is what I mean by the integration of the negative. Yet I believe that this is the core of Jesus' revolutionary good news, the Apostle Paul's deep experience, and the central insight that Francis and Clare of Assisi lived out with such simple elegance. The integration of the negative still has the power to create people who are turning the whole world upside down, as was said of early Christians. Today, some therapists call this pattern of admitting our shortcomings and failures embracing our shadow. Such surrendering of superiority, or even a need for superiority, is central to any authentic enlightenment. Without it, we are misguided ourselves and poor guides for others. Francis and Clare made what most would call the negative or disadvantage shimmer and shine by their delight in what the rest of us ordinarily oppose, deny, and fear. Things like being insignificant, poor, outside systems of power and status, or weakness in any form. Francis generally referred to these conditions as minoritas. This is a different world than most of us choose to live in. We all seem invariably to want to join the majority and to be admired. Francis and Clare instead made a preemptive strike at both life and death, offering a voluntary assent to full reality in all its tragic wonder. They made a loving bow to the very things that defeat, scare, and embitter most of us, such as poverty, powerlessness, and being ridiculed. I personally think that honesty about ourselves and all of reality is the way that God makes grace totally free and universally available. We all find our lives eventually dragged into opposition, problems, the negatives of sin, failure, betrayal, gossip, fear, hurt, disease, etc., and especially the ultimate negation, death itself. Good spirituality should utterly prepare us for that instead of teaching us high-level denial or pretense. Needing a ladder to climb only appeals to our egotistical consciousness and our need to win or be right, which is not really holiness at all, although it has been a common counterfeit for holiness in much of Christian history. The Ten Commandments are about creating social order, a good thing. But the eight Beatitudes of Jesus are all about incorporating what seems like disorder, a negative, which promotes a much better and different level of consciousness.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot there. So hopefully those two give us a better understanding of what he's talking about here, obviously with the theology of darkness, but also this idea of just accepting the uncertainty, accepting the darkness, being patient with ourselves, having the time to be imperfect, and as we continue to work more toward that interior growth from the inside out. But it also is counterintuitive because we grow again not by acquiring. And so the whole idea of self-development is sort of antithetical to the contemplative experience, because in the contemplative experience, we are continuing to get out of the way. We're continuing to let go of what blocks us rather than trying to develop something in the way of perfection. In other words, perfection comes as a byproduct of continuing to step aside more and more of what we identify with as ourselves as separate from everyone else. And so it's such a different experience as you get into it. And some of the problems with some of the spiritual practices that have been developed, especially more recently, is that they seem to have the intent of trying to harness spiritual power in order to manifest what we want out of life. And that is also antithetical to contemplative practice, where we're stepping away from the things that the ego is driving for in order to be able to find that center, that connection that then allows us, to flow forward. Like I said, we all need goals. We all need the not yet to work for, but we're not hanging on to specific outcomes so much as allowing the flexibility for the path to be created as we walk on it. But with the right how, we know that any what along that outcome spectrum will be just fine. We'll be right in the center of God's will anyway. So it's a different kind of experience, and it embraces this unknowing, the humility of uncertainty. All right. I think
My
I'm out of
ego
words.
is screaming right now, Dave. Screaming.
Your ego.
What's
Yeah.
it screaming? What are you hearing in there, dear?
Well, I am not going to live in poverty. I'm
And
struggling.
well,
I'm struggling with
here's the
some of
good
it.
news, Jerry. You don't have to.
Well, that's what I'm hearing, though. I'm
No, no, no,
hearing
no, no.
I
Listen,
have to be
what
poor. I
Claire
have
and
to.
what Claire and Francis did was was the kind of the outward expression of what was happening inward. They turned their poverty into basically a sacrament, if you want to look at it that way. Their physical poverty, their renunciation of all their earthly goods was an outward expression of an inward transformation. It doesn't mean that every single one of us needs to do the same thing. Every single one of us needs to go through the inward transformation. We all need to be willing to let go and clear the decks interiorly. Doesn't mean we have to do it exteriorly. And in fact, if everybody did what Claire and Francis did, then there would have been no one that they could have begged from to get the bread that they needed to eat. So we need to have, a spectrum of people here that are operating their spiritual gifts on different planes, if you will. All right. So yeah, they're the ones that get the accolades and they become saints of the church, and the rest of us have to go on in relative obscurity. But it doesn't matter, because what is happening inside is the key. We can own whatever we own as long as we're not identified with that and identifying with that. They're just tools that we use, and we can use them beautifully or we can use them destructively. But the clearer we get inside, the simpler we get inside, the better we will use our tools. So don't let your ego mess with you tonight. You can keep your house and you can keep your things.
Good.
Rich people are just as blessed and can be just as holy as anybody else. But Jesus did say that it's harder for rich people, wealthy people, to be able to get this because they've got more to lose. You're more invested in the status quo. You're more identified with what you have
Yeah.
than someone who's on the margins of life. It's just the way it is. But it doesn't mean that it's impossible.
It's the identity. I get that.
Yes,
I
just
am
don't
getting.
identify with your stuff.
Yeah.
Just use your stuff and use it for
I'm
the
getting
good
that.
and not for evil.
Yeah, I'm getting that because
All
part
right.
of what I've been doing since I'm feeling better is going through, even like looking at the lamp and seeing the rose. I'm like, oh wow. Why do I've been going through, why do I have this? You know, what is this? What are you identifying with it? So I've been going through my house and I had my Mexican, and which who I was very worried about, but they're okay. Come to the house today, and as I go through the house when I know they're coming, I take things and I put them in a bag and think, oh, Jeanette can use this. Oh, Jeanette can use this, or her family can use this. I'll give you an example of how I know I'm growing. I have a whole box of sterling silver that is from my mother-in-law, my first mother-in-law, who I worshiped and adored. And I kept it, and it's been sitting in a box at my son's house in the basement for years. And I would not let it go. So I'm starting, I think, see what you're saying. I wouldn't let it go because I identified too much with it. I held on to it too much. And I was talking to him yesterday, and he's struggling financially right now. He's in between jobs. Anyway, he asked me, he said something about the silver, and I said, "Oh." And all of a sudden I realized I was holding on to that silver and I was identifying with it because it was silver. And I went, I don't need that. It has sat in the basement for years. And I said to him, go down in the basement, you get that box, you get online, you figure out how much it's worth, you sell it and keep the money. I don't want it. And that was a huge growth for me, an internal growth for me as far as is letting go of my identifying with the value of that silver. And I thought, I mean, it was just, I don't know. To me, it was a God moment of growth and going more internally instead of externally. Is that real? Is that what you're talking about? Or am I just patting
Absolutely.
myself on
That's
the back?
beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. You can do that with silver. Just don't do it with gold. Okay. Hang on to the
Oh,
gold.
okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, it just, and I said to him, this was your inheritance eventually anyway, because it was your grandmother. So why not have it now? I'm not even using.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember going out into the garage a few months ago looking for something, and I stumbled upon a box that had all of this paperwork, songs I had written and manuscript and this and that and the other thing. And I'm thinking all this was so important to me at one point in my life. Now it sits in a box in the garage. And at some point, my kids are going to look at all this crap and say, what the heck are we going to do with this? And they're just going to throw it out. It represents years and thousands of hours of work on my part, and it meant something. But to somebody else, you know, it's like, can we start to sever those ties? Can we start to let go? It doesn't mean that we don't keep sentimental keepsakes and all of that sort of thing, but
I'm
can we
keeping the
start
Hummels.
to de-identify, unidentify? That's the whole key here.
So Jerry, can I add my ego comes into when you told
Absolutely.
yeah, when you say about the sterling silver, sell it, keep the money. To me, a part of me as the mother will say, well, squirrel away maybe 25%, 30%, have a compounded interest, 4%, 5%, it pays for itself. That's my ego.
I hear you. Thank you, Ellen.
All right.
I totally let it go, gave it all to him. Do what you want with it.
Good job, dear. All right. Well, I will include the theology of darkness. Did anybody want this meditation as well that we read? Okay, I'll attach both of them to the email that goes out tomorrow with the link for the recording, so you can take a look at those. But another good session tonight, everybody. Thank you. All right, it's
Thank you,
getting
Dave.
late, even though we don't have East Coast here with us tonight, so we have to worry about William staying up too late. But did we lose? Oh, there he is. Scotty, your turn.
Lord, thank you for this evening and the time we spend together and the time we spend with you. It's amazing the more time we spend with you and the knowledge that you share with us and the things that you make plain to us and just the way you love us, Lord. It seems to be my theme lately. I'm really focused on how you love us, and we're grateful for that love, Lord. Father, help us to be at peace this coming week and to just play our part as the world turns and to find a space to allow God in and enjoy the relationship. We love you, Lord. Thank you for loving us and caring about us and providing a way for us to live our lives while celebrating the gift of life that you gave us. It's in your holy name, Lord Jesus, that we pray and we give our thanks and we say our amens. Amen.
Amen. Thank you,
Amen.
Scotty.
Amen, everyone.
got it.
Thank you
Thank you,
again.
Scotty.
Bye, everybody.
See
See
you
you
on
Sunday,
Sunday.
guys.
Bye.
Good
Bye,
night, guys.
Thank you. Bye,
Good night.
Joanna.
Good night.
Night.
Good night. Yeah, George. Good
Good
night,
night.
Jordana. George.
Okay,
Huh?
see you
Jordana.
Yeah.
on Sunday.
Yeah, George and Georgiana. There you go.
All right. See you Sunday.
Jordana.
Bye.
Good night.